Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. On the M8 eastbound at junction 23, lane 3 is partially blocked by a broken-down vehicle. The M4 westbound is slow between junction 33 at Capel Lanilturn and junction 34 at Miskin, with heavy congestion. On the M18 northbound exit slip at junction 5 near Doncaster, a breakdown has left one of 2 lanes closed. In Leicestershire, the A46 northbound is queuing between the A607 at Siston North and the A6006. And on the trains, cross-country disruption affects Exeter St David's to Paignton and Plymouth, with Great Western Railway disruption on various routes. For more travel news, go to GB News.
An incredible £85,000 in tax-free cash could be yours.
Hi, I'm Jane. I won £54,321 with the Great British Giveaway. Oh, definitely please enter. It is real, and that one text has just made my life 100% better.
For another chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB18 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 30th of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Bold.
They are under no illusion.
Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dewbs & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
All too often, people will be sitting at home watching a press conference live, and they'll hear loads of questions being asked, and they'll be thinking, that's not my question, that's not my concern.
We don't care whose feathers we ruffle. We ask the questions that you want answering.
You're all standing on the street protesting and want to have an open discussion.
My name's Patrick Christie. I do a show for GB News in the UK. Is it possible to talk to you quickly?
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink until now.
Well, this is the best view ever of Whitehall, looking out across all the tractor drivers of England who've come together to make their point.
Hello, so as you can see, I'm here in Westminster as the protest begins.
Yes, I'm very much in the thick of it.
Look, we're challenging narratives here at GB News, and that's what sets us apart.
Good evening, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Miriam Cates and you're watching Dewbs & Co. Coming up in the next hour.
We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
Well, that was what Donald Trump had to say last night about NATO troops. But this afternoon, Sir Keir Starmer has called on the US president to apologise, saying the remarks were insulting and frankly appalling, given that 457 British personnel died in that conflict. Elsewhere, Justice Secretary David Lammy has indicated that he might be about to row back on plans to scrap jury trials for all but the most serious criminal cases. Critics of Lammy's plans say they would undermine fundamental rights and fail to reduce the court backlog. So could the government be on the verge of a 14th U-turn? And will Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham return to Parliament and challenge Sir Keir Starmer for the leadership of the Labour Party and the keys to number 10? Well, following the resignation of Labour MP Andrew Gwynn from the House of Commons, a door has opened for the King of the North. But will Starmer's allies slam it shut? And despite a remarkable and turbulent week in international politics, one uniquely British story has made all the front pages. Yes, the Beckham family feud has captured the nation. But why are we so fascinated by warring celebs? And whose side are you on? And joining me for some lively debate, I've got my panel, the former Conservative Minister Tom Pursglove and former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. But first, here are your latest news headlines.
Miriam, thank you and good evening. It's just gone 6 o'clock. These are your headlines. As you've been hearing, Sir Keir Starmer says Donald Trump's remarks about British troops in Afghanistan are insulting and frankly appalling, and suggested he should apologise. The White House, meanwhile, has responded exclusively to GB News, saying President Trump is right. America's contributions to NATO dwarf that of other countries. Earlier, Downing Street said Mr Trump was wrong to diminish the role of NATO and British troops in Afghanistan after the US president claimed allies stayed away from the front lines in the conflict. In an interview with Fox News in Davos, the US president repeated his criticism of NATO, saying he was not sure the alliance would be there if we ever needed them. The NATO Secretary-General, Mark Rutte, confronted the US president on his claims, saying NATO will be there for the US. The Prime Minister suggested Trump should apologise.
Consider President Trump's remarks to be insulting and frankly appalling. And I'm not surprised they've caused such hurt to the loved ones of those who were killed or injured, and in fact, across the...
Meanwhile, some breaking news in the last few minutes. Prince Harry has responded to President Trump's comments on British troops in Afghanistan, saying, "I served there and I lost friends there, and those sacrifices deserve to be spoken about truthfully and with respect." Elsewhere now, Angela Rayner will back Andy Burnham being allowed to stand in the Gorton and Denton by-election after Andrew Gwynn stepped down. It's understood the former Deputy Prime Minister is supportive of allowing Burnham to stand and is likely to say so at Labour's North West Regional Conference on Saturday. It all comes as Mr Burnham faces pressure to decide whether he will attempt to return to Westminster after Andrew Gwynn announced he would quit the Commons. Gwynn said he'll stand down as MP for Gorton and Denton, citing significant ill health and advice from his doctor not to return to work. His decision means a by-election in the constituency, which he won comfortably in 2024, and opens a possible route back to the Commons for Burnham. He's widely believed to have ambitions to lead the Labour Party. Mr Burnham, though, has yet to comment on whether he will apply to be Labour's candidate. A former councillor has pleaded guilty to drugging and raping his ex-wife over a 13-year period. 49-year-old Philip Young has pleaded guilty to offences against his 48-year-old former spouse, Joanne Young, who has waived her legal right to anonymity. Our GB News national reporter Will Godley is outside the court.
He admitted a total of 48 offences against his former wife, Joanne Young, who was watching on from the courtroom. They include rape, administering a substance with intent and voyeurism. He also pleaded not guilty to further counts of making indecent images of children, possessing prohibited and extreme pornographic images. 5 further men have been charged in relation to this trial. 4 of them today pleaded not guilty, and a trial will go ahead in October.
And the main illegal migrant arrival point at Dover Harbour has been forced to close for urgent repairs as the Home Office braces for another year of massive small boat numbers across the Channel. The temporary migrant reception centre at the Kent port has had to cope with close to 130,000 migrants since opening in 2022, far more than originally envisioned. It comes as the Home Office pushes ahead with controversial plans to use more and more military sites to house those arriving illegally. Those are your latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Miriam.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Welcome to Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and joining me until 7 o'clock, I've got my panel, the former Conservative Minister Tom Pursglove and former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. And do remember to get your views and opinions in, gbnews.com/your say. We'll be reading those out throughout the show. Now, our top story tonight, the Prime Minister has issued a passionate response to remarks that President Trump has made about NATO forces' record of service in Afghanistan.
Let me start by paying tribute to the 457 of our armed services who lost their lives in Afghanistan. I will never forget their courage, their bravery, and the sacrifice that they made for their country. There are many also who were injured, some with life-changing injuries. And so I consider President Trump's remarks to be insulting and frankly appalling. And I'm not surprised they've caused such hurt to the loved ones of those who were killed or injured, and in fact, across the country.
Well, this stern rebuke came after the US president claimed in a Fox News interview that NATO would not support America if asked, and that NATO forces stayed a little back during 2 decades fighting in Afghanistan.
We always said, will they be there if we ever needed them? And that's really the ultimate test, and I'm not sure of that. I know that we would have been there, or we would be there. But will they be there? And let's hope that that never happens. We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines. But we've been very good to Europe and to many other countries.
Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by the Armed Forces Minister, Al Carnes. Mr Carnes, thank you so much for joining me this evening. As a veteran yourself, what did you feel when you first heard President Trump's words last night?
I was actually on the way to the gym this morning and I heard them, and I got straight on socials to sort of give my view. You know, I fought in Afghanistan. I did 5 tours, but this really isn't about me. This is about the thousands of other people that fought and deployed to Afghanistan, but importantly, all of the families that were left behind. I always say if one person serves, the whole family serves. And we've also remember the footage of, you know, Royal Wootton Bassett coffins coming back. So to say that, one, we didn't stand up for America at the time of need, you know, when September 11th happened, who stood by them? Well, NATO called Article 5, which meant every country stood by and said it was an armed attack on the US. The UK was at the very forefront of that from 2001 in Afghanistan. And then for 20 years, we stood by the US and will continue to stand by our allies no matter what. But to hear those words, you know, really cut deep for lots of people in this country. And all I can say to them is absolutely thank you for your service, for those that served and all of their families that supported them when doing so.
How do you think the White House will react to the rebuke by the Prime Minister? Until now, Sir Keir Starmer has been very careful to stay on the right side of Donald Trump. He's a president who's known for shooting from the hip and making perhaps unconsidered remarks. But how do you think the White House will respond to this challenge?
Well, I'm hoping this was just, you know, misspoken. Those that don't read history are doomed to repeat it. That's the reality. The fact is, when 9/11 took place, NATO stood up and supported the US, shoulder to shoulder. Soldier, sailor, airman, politician, or intelligence agencies, everyone rallied to the call to support the US at their time of need. And that's the real lesson from this is, you know, the worst thing than working with allies, unfortunately, is working without them. And united, we are far stronger. And that's something we just got to keep pushing. Ukraine needs allies. We are behind Ukraine collectively. We're pushing towards peace. This is all about being stronger together. And that's what we must never forget with us, you know, Western like-minded nations, to stick together when times get tough.
But I suppose the problem with that, and something that Donald Trump is perhaps right about, although he's indisputably wrong about the comments about NATO forces in Afghanistan, he is correct that Europe has spent far too little on defence over the past couple of decades and actually isn't in a position to defend ourselves now. How is Britain going to respond to that?
Well, I think, you know, I would agree with some of those comments. We haven't spent enough on defence. I think Europe now recognises that. I think the UK has recognised that. We put more money into defence than in the last 14 years, and it's going to grow over the next 5 to 10. And if you look across the whole of Europe, that's the same message. And so Europe is absolutely building up its defence capabilities. But it's also worth noting, stepping back and looking at this holistically. If you take US out of the system, you look at the European defence numbers, whether that be standing army, whether that be tanks, artillery, armoured personnel carriers, fast jets, ships, we are a huge collective military force. And it's often forgot. And we downplay ourselves quite a lot. Actually, collectively, us and Europe have a significant amount of military hardware that is probably collectively, in fact, I think it is, one of the biggest militaries in the world.
Mr. Carnes, huge thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. That was Armed Forces Minister Al Carnes speaking to us about his view of Sir Keir Starmer's rebuke to Donald Trump. It will be interesting to see what happens next. So let's bring in my panel now to discuss this. A marked change from Sir Keir Starmer. Obviously, the nation collectively is pretty upset about Trump's comments last night, but we have grown used to President Trump shooting from the hip. Do you think Starmer's right to return his aggression?
I think the whole country will be furious, actually, about what the President has said. And on this occasion, he has undoubtedly crossed a line. 457 lives were lost, British lives were lost in Afghanistan, leaving behind devastated families who live with the consequences of that to this day. They should be at the forefront of our thinking today because they will be suffering because of these comments that are completely misjudged, wrong in a historical sense as well, and should be unreservedly withdrawn and apologised for. And I think it's right that on behalf of the country, the Prime Minister is being very strong in saying this is not acceptable, it is not grounded in fact, and that they should be apologised for and withdrawn. That, I think, is what every like-minded, fair-minded person in the country will be thinking. This is completely unacceptable. He's gone far too far on this occasion.
Bill, do you think Starmer's made the right response?
I think he has. I mean, my last job in government was Minister of State for the Armed Forces, and I met and worked with bereaved families. I attended in Afghanistan what are called ramp ceremonies, where the coffins are taken onto the aircraft to repatriate them home, and it's etched on my memory and my soul. And for President Trump to claim that our troops weren't on the front line in Afghanistan is utterly abhorrent and is a complete lie. And, you know, the statement that was initially put out by Number 10 this morning, where it said, you know, Trump had diminished the role of NATO forces, as I was coming here this afternoon, I thought it's not strong enough and the Prime Minister's going to have to go on camera and make it utterly clear how wrong Trump is. And I wholly welcome the fact that he's done that in very clear terms. And I have to say, I've never known a British Prime Minister speak about the President of the United States as Keir Starmer has done this afternoon. But I think that is welcome.
Well, I think there's never been a need, quite possibly.
Yeah.
But Keir Starmer's not the only person who has responded to Trump's claims. Prince Harry has also issued a statement. Of course, he is also a veteran, served in the armed forces and in Afghanistan. And he said that in 2001, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in history. It meant that every allied nation was obliged to stand with the United States in Afghanistan in pursuit of our shared security. Allies answered that call. I served there. I made lifelong friends there, and I lost friends there too. The United Kingdom alone had 457 service personnel killed. Thousands of lives were changed forever. Mothers and fathers buried sons and daughters. Children were left without a parent. Families are left carrying the cost. So Prince Harry there intervening also on this row. Now, Bill, a lot of people are very upset, clearly, about the implications of Trump's statement, and also have drawn attention to the fact that Trump himself dodged the draft for Vietnam. He didn't serve when he could have done. But do you think we are reading too much into this? We know that Donald Trump does not make considered remarks. We know that historical knowledge and accuracy are not really his strong suit. He's more an instinct kind of guy. Do you think we're reading too much in claiming that this was a direct insult?
I think you're being a bit charitable. Another way of putting it is he's a pathological liar, and it's been demonstrated time and again. And look, you know, this government under Keir Starmer, I think, has had the right approach with Trump. We do have an important relationship with them. We are, you know, dependent for trade opportunities and a whole host of other things. And, you know, the Prime Minister has worked with him, flattered his ego, which you have to do to reap benefits. But there are pinch points where President Trump just goes completely over the top and too far. And he did that this week. And, you know, in terms of, and you're right about him dodging the draft 5 times. And if he wants to cast aspersions on contributions to collective security, let's go back in history. You know, America was 3 years late into the First World War, 2 years late into the Second World War. So if we're going to take lectures from anybody about our commitment to collective security, forgive me, I'm not going to take it from Donald Trump.
Well, I would completely agree with you about his statement about NATO troops in Afghanistan. He's just plain wrong. But what he is not wrong about is the fact that Europe have collectively relied on the US for our security for the last couple of decades at least. We've swapped warfare for welfare. We spend all our money now on welfare. We haven't ramped up defence anywhere near as quickly as we could have done. We've got some tough choices to make.
Well, when you look at it, the only people who benefit from what has happened in the last 24 hours are our adversaries.
Yeah.
Because in the end, you can disagree with the basis for the conflict in Afghanistan, which perhaps President Trump does. You can think that other NATO allies aren't paying their fair share, but what you don't do is denigrate our armed forces in any of those NATO countries who serve bravely. Our British men and women are the best of the best. And all of us in politics, I think, have a responsibility to get that message out there and be very strong about it. And we should, of course, be doing more. And that's why it is right, and I think there should be cross-party support for increased defence spending. We should also look at how that can boost our supply chains in this country in terms of using British materials and supporting British jobs. And we should, when we look at, for example, Ukraine, be taking responsibility for our collective defence on this continent. That includes, of course, having strong relationships with the US. The only people who benefit from the sort of disorder and the anger and the annoyance and the frustration and the fractured relationships that these sorts of comments bring about are those who would seek to do us harm, and that is a tragedy and totally unacceptable.
But we've done that harm to ourselves. And if you look at our troop numbers, I mean, just since 2010, in 2010 we had 109,000 British troops, now just 72,500. Estimates that if we had to put troops in Ukraine, if we somehow got into that war, we could perhaps muster 25,000 if we're lucky. Russia's got 700,000 troops on the ground in Ukraine. We have allowed our armed forces to dwindle to pathetic levels, and all we've got left is words.
Yeah, and forgive me, I'm on a panel with 2 former Tory MPs.
Yeah, the Conservatives absolutely take responsibility.
You know, Ben
for
Wallace said the last Tory government hollowed out the armed forces. They did.
No,
when we
absolutely.
left office in
I'm
2010...
not interested in apportioning...
No. But
not apportioning
defence
blame.
spending was at 2.5% of GDP when the last Labour government left office.
Left with a cracked economy, of course,
and it dwindled significantly. We've got to ramp it up. The current government is committed to doing that, but there does need to be cross-party consensus because this will involve difficult choices about where you get the resources from and how you apportion it. But we live in a much, much more dangerous world than I've ever known, probably in my adult lifetime. And that means we need to commit more to defence.
Well, the White House has already responded to Keir Starmer's statement. The White House Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly has said President Trump is right. America's contributions to NATO dwarf that of other countries, and his success in delivering a 5% spending pledge from NATO allies is helping Europe take greater responsibility for its own defence. The United States is the only NATO partner who can protect Greenland, and the President is advancing NATO interests in doing so.
And that statement completely dodges the critique of how gratuitous and offensive it was that what President Trump said.
And also, our US correspondent Ben Leo did the maths earlier and pointed out that per capita, we did sadly lose a very similar number of soldiers in Afghanistan to the US. Of course, they make the biggest contribution. They're massive. They have much more money than us. But life for life in Afghanistan, it was a similar contribution.
That's right. And actually, when you look at, for example, spending in relation to Ukraine, it is actually European countries that are really stepping up to the plate and paying the lion's share. The President was right. Successive US presidents have been demanding action from European countries to step up to the plate, to pay more, to take greater responsibility. We are doing that. I think the point Bill makes about difficult choices that this involves, there's a lot of pitch rolling that government needs to do about the choices that this involves. If you want to spend more on defence, that does mean that in areas like welfare, you have to make very difficult decisions. That may be unpalatable to a lot of Labour MPs, but that is the reality.
And the public, quite possibly. Also a problem in a democracy. Well, coming up, could the government be on the verge of a 14th U-turn as David Lammy considers reversing his decision to scrap jury trials? Stick with us.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dewbs, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power?
Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics.
We'll see where this ruling takes us.
These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Kate, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock, I've got Tom Pursglove and Bill Rammell joining me on the panel. And let's have a look at what some of you have been saying on gbnews.com/your say, talking about Keir Starmer's response to the President Trump. Ian says Starmer's words would carry more weight if he protected our troops from historic legal action, referring to the Northern Ireland Troubles bill there. And Craig says Trump's a bully. He's really showing his Putin side this time around. Perhaps that's what Starmer's thinking, stand up to the bully. Roland, though, says Starmer has a nerve, the hypocrite, when wounded veterans can't get benefits. Do keep your views coming in, gbnews.com/your say. Now, on to our next topic, and could we be heading for another government U-turn, this time on jury trials? Well, David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, says that he is open to a conversation on alternatives to the government's proposed changes to the jury system. Well, ministers have suggested that scrapping jury trials for offences carrying a likely prison sentence of 3 years or less in a bid to tackle the Crown Court backlog, which now stands at nearly 80,000 outstanding cases. But with growing concerns over access to justice and defendants' rights, is this another policy that the government may yet be forced to rethink? Let's start with you, Bill. A lot of people got a problem with this idea from a fundamental rights point of view, but let's just look at the practicalities of this. And the Institute for Government estimate that even if these reforms did go ahead, it would potentially only save about 2% of court time in total. Is it really worth it?
Well, the government's estimate, and I think it's reliable, is actually it would reduce the backlog by about 20%. And I do broadly support these changes because, you know, what's the phrase? Justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah.
And there are some cases that are taking 5 years to come to court. You imagine you are the victim, and 5 years after the event, you've got to go into court, relive the horror of that experience by giving evidence. The backlog is huge and it's unsustainable and it needs to be tackled. So I think the reforms are broadly correct. However, I don't think there's going to be a U-turn, but I think there may be amendments. If you look at the original Leveson proposals, instead of just a single judge sitting on one of these minor cases, he said it should be a judge plus 2 lay magistrates. Lammy says he's open to that, and I think that would be a sensible change. I also wonder, there's been debate about whether there should be what's called a sunset clause introduced into the legislation. You know, this is about clearing the backlog. Well, if that is the case, clear the backlog, and then maybe the reduction in jury trials should cease. So I think that may be another thing the government is open to. But on the broad principle that we desperately need real radical measures to clear the backlog, I think David Lammy is right.
But Tom, according to this report by the Institute for Government, the majority of the backlog cleared, or the time saving, would be on the other reform, which is encouraging magistrates to hear more cases, raising the maximum sentences they are allowed to give, and that actually cutting juries from some of these either-way trials would be a minimal saving of time. Is it worth it?
No, I don't think it is, and I think actually what the government is doing is incurring huge political damage with this. When you look at Carl Turner, for example, who is often so supportive of what Labour politicians have to say.
Is it MP for Kingston upon Hull?
He is indeed, and has obviously held various positions in opposition, for example, in the sort of shadow law office roles, so very authoritative, very knowledgeable, has got a background in all of this, saying this is a terrible idea. And I do think that we need to take note when people like that are saying these things, because from my point of view, I'm very sceptical about the efficiencies that this would drive. But this is also a cornerstone of the way in which our country operates. Actually, that stubborn independence of juries, I would say, is critically important. That right to be heard by a jury of your peers and for them to decide your fate is critically important. And I don't think that that is something that we should do away with lightly. I actually agree with David Lammy in opposition when he was saying that this would be the wrong thing to do when there was talk of potentially looking at these sorts of options. And I'm just not convinced that all of the other alternatives haven't been properly looked at. For example, extra sitting hours have been offered, but my understanding is that they weren't taken up. Why aren't we looking at standing up Nightingale courts? If the backlog is the issue, we should be looking at innovative ways in which we can try and build immediate capacity. But one of the difficult truths in all of this is that you probably need to look at the way in which the legal profession is paid, because actually one of the big barriers to getting cases heard and the sort of efficient running of the courts is around legal aid and the funding available to support barristers and the like from going about their duties.
If the government wants to reduce the backlog, they're going to have to pay for it.
Well, I mean, I think you raise a really interesting point that the legal profession have got a vested interest in the way the current system works, and they're lobbying like mad and raising all sorts of issues to oppose this. I mean, yes, for serious offences, I think jury trials are important. But even after these changes, the percentage of jury trials will be roughly the same as it is in the United States and significantly more than in most of Europe. So this isn't a dramatic change of the way we rule and govern ourselves. It is about a sensible set of changes, in my view, to clear an unacceptable backlog. But personally, I'm open particularly to the idea of a sunset clause. So it's emergency measures to clear the backlog, and then maybe in 5 years' time, you take it off the statute book.
I think you might be onto something about the lawyers' vested interest. I've just had a quick look, and the UK has one of the highest numbers of lawyers per capita in Europe, and only marginally less the United States. Perhaps this is a problem. Too many lawyers.
Well, I'm not sure that we would necessarily want to import the US legal system.
That's what I'm saying. I was saying we need to reduce the number of lawyers per head.
And actually, you know, you look at the way in which legal matters are conducted in the US, and often it is quite a spectacle. So I think people would be slightly concerned about that. I actually am also very concerned about the risks of miscarriages of justice. And I think that if it was a loved one of yours or someone that you know that was appearing before a court, I would much rather them being able to argue their case in front of a jury of their peers where that is appropriate, rather than it being left effectively to one individual. So it may well be that it goes beyond what is proposed at the moment, where actually the proposal is around just one judge hearing these trials and making these adjudications. Maybe it will be that there will be a concession to Labour backbenchers and others in Parliament to try and expand that panel almost with magistrates sat on it. But I do think that it is absolutely right and proper that we put victims first, and we must have that at the forefront of our minds. But that's why I'm not convinced that various things like looking at using those additional sitting hours, like looking at whether Nightingale courts might solve this, will actually lead to better outcomes, because what we don't want is unsafe verdicts, miscarriages of justice, and all of the consequences that brings too. And I think it increases the likelihood of that happening, because actually juries are more likely to acquit. But I also think it's just a fundamental liberty that we have in this country, and we tamper with that at our peril.
But Tom, we're not putting victims first. You know, you imagine you are the victim of an attempted murder and you've recovered from that, you've tried to put your life back together, and 5 years down the road, you've got to go onto the witness stand and give evidence in a criminal trial. And
that just shouldn't be allowed to happen. And that's why the resources have got to be made available to get on and hear these cases.
And the problem that the government has got is that they've U-turned so many times now, it's going to be very difficult to resist this one. Well, coming up, could Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham make a return to Parliament? Could he mount a leadership challenge to Sir Keir Starmer? And would he really be any better than the current Prime Minister for the Labour Party? And also, Ben Leo will be bringing us the latest from the White House as the Prime Minister demands that Donald Trump should apologise for his comments on NATO. That's all after the break.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries, all sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
The Canary Islands, the place to be at the moment for the best of any drier and brighter weather. Otherwise, it's unsettled throughout much of southern Europe. Very windy through Iberia. That's going to be the case for a few days to come. Those strong winds gusting around the Portuguese coast and hills, where there will be spells of rain and some mountain snow. There'll also be spells of rain moving through central parts of the Med, drier for parts of Greece, particularly around the islands.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Gusty winds and showery rain will continue for many of us this weekend. Not everywhere all the time. There will be some drier and indeed sunnier weather. But it'll also feel colder with that cold air coming in from the east, although not excessively cold. And we still have low pressure towards the southwest to contend with, gusty and wet for Cornwall, Devon especially, but those bands of rain and showers pushing into the rest of the southwest as well as parts of Wales overnight. The wind gusts coming down a little by dawn, but it stays windy in the east of Scotland with further outbreaks of rain and hill snow here. In between, actually, there will be some drier and clearer weather, Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, through the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, starting off with some sunshine. The odd mist and fog patch, chilly first thing, but actually plenty of fine weather. Wales, though, especially South Wales, cloudy and damp, and we'll see some rain starting to return at this stage into southern parts of Northern Ireland. But the most persistent rain continues across eastern and northeastern Scotland. Above 400 metres, this will be falling as snow, significant snow accumulations over the Grampians, the hills and mountains, seeing ice accretion and blizzard conditions, so really quite treacherous on top of the Grampians. But it does ease off later in the day on Saturday. The rain at lower levels also eases. Continuing to be showery towards the southwest, but we do keep that drier slot across central parts of the UK with some sunshine. Not necessarily continuing into Sunday, because we'll see another band of rain move northeastwards through Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland, the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. Spells of rain turning increasingly showery for many and feeling colder as that air comes in from the east and southeast. That will lead to some snow, especially across northern parts on Tuesday.
Thank you for making us Britain's #1 news channel. Together, we have built something truly extraordinary.
Good evening, this is the latest AI travel news from GBnews.com. On the A726, the eastbound carriageway is closed between Righead Roundabout and Eaglesham Road due to emergency roadworks. On the A55 at Britannia Bridge, there is a 30 miles per hour limit in both directions until further notice. In Nottinghamshire, the A1 southbound is slow between the A57 and the junction with the A6075, with around 15 minutes of congestion. In Thurrock, the M25 anti-clockwise between junction 30 and junction 29 has a lane shut after a crash. And on the trains, Cross Country and Great Western Railway report major disruption between Exeter St David's and Paignton and Plymouth. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Kate. Keeping me company until 7 o'clock, I've got the former Conservative Minister Tom Pursglove and former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Now, the rumour mill in Westminster shifted into overdrive today when news broke that the former Health Minister Andrew Gwynn would be stepping down from his Gorton and Denton seat. And the Manchester-based MP, who previously had the Labour whip withdrawn over leaked WhatsApp messages, is vacating his seat due to serious ill health. Well, that decision has fuelled speculation that it could open the door for the Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, to return to Parliament and mount a leadership challenge to the Prime Minister. Well, responding to the rumours, this is what the Prime Minister said yesterday.
Andy Burnham is doing an excellent job as Mayor of Manchester. We work very closely together. Last year, we were responding together to the terrible attack on a synagogue in Manchester. More recently, we've been working together on the Northern Powerhouse rail. And I think Andy would acknowledge that working with this government has been much better than the experience he had of working with previous governments.
Well, since then, the Prime Minister's allies have been briefing that they intend to block the Mayor of Greater Manchester's candidacy, while the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, has cautioned rebels against rocking the boat. But the former Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, is now backing calls for the Manchester Mayor to stand in that Gorton and Denton by-election. So, panel, could Andy Burnham make a better Prime Minister than Keir Starmer? Tom, it's about time the attention was taken off the Tories and reform, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, I think in answer to your question, unquestionably, Andy Burnham would be a better Prime Minister than the one that we've got at the moment. And the road is fast running out for Keir Starmer. And I think the challenge that he has got and that the Labour Party have got, or the echelons with the National Executive Committee have got, is that if you block him, it's over. If you let him run, it's over. In many respects, their best chance is to let him stand. And if he loses, it rather clips his wings. But Andy Burnham... we don't agree on a whole lot of things, but he is very personable. I think he is somebody who's got an ability to be able to relate to voters and comes across well. You only have to look at the fact that in Greater Manchester, where he's the mayor currently, he does get a very significant share of the vote from voters who in a general election would not vote Labour. And I think he has got a sort of superpower politically that could be of help to the Labour Party, much as it pains me to say.
But Bill, even if he was allowed to stand and was selected and went to stand in the by-election, he might not win. I mean, the polls do show Labour winning it just, but Reform will throw everything at that. It's a great opportunity in opposition to win a seat off the government. Could it be just too risky for him to take it?
Well, I think that's the calculation that he's making at the moment. But look, I think parties beware constantly changing your leader. The last government demonstrated that the electorate kick back when that happens on a regular basis. Personally, I like Andy. I worked with him in government. I'm not convinced he's leadership material, particularly because there's a lack of consistency. When I worked with him in government, he was, for want of a better phrase, an uber Blairite. He's now the leftist champion of the North. I'm not sure there's a degree of consistency there. And there are significant obstacles to him running in the by-election. One, the NEC can block him, not for political reasons, but for the important reason that he holds a major elected office in the mayoralty of Greater Manchester. And that's just going to be thrown away, and we're then going to have a by-election for the mayor of Greater Manchester. Also, if he was selected, you know, the by-election would be dominated by constant questioning about what's your ambition, are you going to stand against Keir Starmer, would totally divert the by-election. And as you say, Miriam, even though there's a 13,000 majority, it's by no means guaranteed that Andy or any other candidate at the moment would win it. So I don't think ultimately he will either be allowed to go for it or will try to go for it.
Do you think if you were Keir Starmer, would you block Andy Burnham? Would you find a way?
I think it just speeds up the Prime Minister's demise from number 10 if you block him, because there will clearly be significant numbers of people in the Labour Party who think that Andy Burnham could do a better job, more likely to help them to win their seats. And actually, when you look at candidates to potentially stand in this by-election, I think with the name recognition that he's got, as I say, with that ability to be able to reach across and to pull voters in from other political parties, he probably is the best bet that they've got to hold on to that seat. So I can see this being a bit of a nightmare weekend. But undoubtedly, what Angela Rayner has done today in coming out and endorsing him and saying he's the right person has upped the ante. I think it's very difficult to walk back from that. Perhaps a conversation was had there, and the two of them have colluded that it may well be beneficial for Andy to stand. Time will tell.
It will.
But it's hard to come off that when someone as senior as Angela has actually come out there and said he'd be the right fit.
I foresee a statement saying how important the mayoralty is and how he wants to see it through to the end of his term. That's my prediction. We'll see. Well, for more reaction on the news we were covering earlier concerning Donald Trump's veterans comments, we now have our Late Show Live presenter, Ben Leo, joining us live down the line. Ben, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. We've seen from you the statement that the White House have put out about Trump's comment in relation to Keir Starmer's admonishment of him. But how much of a story is this, the other side of the pond?
I don't think it's really... Good evening, by the way. I don't think it's really cutting through or landing here in the United States. And, by the way, I will say, particularly with the White House, because I went to them and said, hello, guys, can I get a statement, a response, please, into this massive story that's kicking off in the UK? I gave them Keir Starmer's statement calling President Trump's remarks insulting and appalling. I asked them to clarify specifically whether President Trump was including the United Kingdom when he made the comments about NATO. So I was very specific in my questioning, and they came back with that rather generic statement about NATO, but starting off by saying President Trump is right. And really, this is blowing up more than I think the White House would have expected. I've gone back to them for clarity on their statement, and also giving them a chance, I guess, to again clarify whether they did President Trump did mean to include the United Kingdom when he was talking about NATO. Because I think the longer this goes on, and until we do get a proper clarification, I said that it would be an overreaction earlier today to Martin, but I actually think now I've changed my mind. I think King Charles's visit to the United States in April, potentially, maybe 10-20% chance, is now under risk, because King Charles, of course, is the head of the armed forces. We've seen his son, Prince Harry, this afternoon release a statement and weigh in with his opinion. The likes of Nigel Farage have called out President Trump, saying he's wrong. And I think we are going to be hearing at some point from Buckingham Palace, maybe not tonight, but probably tomorrow. It does now raise questions about his visit in April. And, yeah, with regards to Keir Starmer's comments, it's good to see Keir Starmer sticking up for Britain, but he has been getting stick on off his own back. It was only days ago that his party voted to allow the prosecution of veterans from the Troubles. So a bit of hypocrisy there. But it is kicking off, and this is blowing up more than I think the White House would have expected, Miriam.
Well, it will be interesting to see, Ben, if they do issue an apology. I don't think Keir Starmer will be holding his breath. Ben Leo there, joining us live from Washington. Thank you very much for joining us, Ben. Well, stick with us, because coming up, we're going to be taking a trip to the Dewberry Tavern. And one story that has dominated all of the front pages this week, yes, it's the Beckhams. Stick with us.
I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co. with you.
Hello, everyone. Patrick Christie is here. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m.
Only on GB News.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. We're now in the Dewberry Tavern, seeing as it's Friday night. Cheers. Hope you have a great weekend. And still keeping me company, I've got my panel, Tom Pursglove and Bill Rammell. Now, there is a Staffordshire local pub that has just been crowned the best pub in Britain. It's not their first time either. It's the Tamworth Tap. They're now a 3-time Camera Pub of the Year winner, only narrowly beating the Dewberry Tavern. Perhaps it's the way that your pint was poured, Tom, has cut us out of the running, sadly. Well, let's finish with a story that's less geopolitical than the other ones we've been covering tonight, but it is a story that's captivated the nation. This is the Beckham family feud. Of course, Brooklyn Beckham, the eldest son, broke his silence on the rift with his parents with a post on Instagram. Now, in the latest post, thanks to a viral campaign made by dedicated fans, Victoria Beckham's song, Not Such an Innocent Girl, is topping the charts, making this her very first #1 hit solo. Now, I slightly can't believe this story. I mean, if you even went back 20 years in time before social media, I mean, you couldn't imagine how this story would start. But there seems to be this feud about who likes who other's posts, and did Victoria Beckham dance inappropriately at the wedding? I mean, what is going on? Question #1. But why are we so interested in this, Tom? Not you personally, perhaps, but the nation.
I'm not hugely interested.
Well, you should be.
And I always feel rather sad, actually, when these family disputes play out in public, because, they've got a huge public profile. Of course they have. Their careers have been built on that public profile, but everybody's got a bit of a right to privacy. So I find this quite difficult, particularly where people's kids get bought into things, and clearly the relationships have become really strained. Week isn't all bad, as you say, because she's top of the charts, and so, on a bad week, that's a bit of a silver lining. But I, more than anything else, just find it all a bit sad, really.
There are parallels as well to Prince Harry's separation from the royal family, and, I agree, it's tragic, but what a strange British response to make Victoria Beckham #1 in the charts. Do you think Britain is on Team Victoria?
Well, it's not so queer as folk, as they say. I mean, look, I agree with Tom. I think it is sad. Why are people interested in it? in it, because whatever you think of them, it's a £500 million brand. They are world famous. And Brooklyn Beckham's bit on Instagram was absolutely devastating about his relationship with his parents, talking about them being controlling, talking about them believing that the brand was important above all else. And, you know, it really was quite sad. You know, over the years, I've developed some admiration for David and Victoria. They're self-made people. You know, you read some of the stuff about David Beckham, where he'd go back to the Man United training ground in the afternoon on his own to practice free kicks, to make himself world class. I think there's a lot to admire about them, but I think the brand has taken over, and I've got some personal experience of that. When I was Vice-Chancellor of the University of Bedfordshire, Sky News contacted us and said they wanted to use our sports ground for a documentary with David Beckham. My press team said, great, it's an income earner, and you should have a photo op with David Beckham. So we pitched that, and they said yes, but I spent 3 hours at the ground whilst his team were circling him, controlling him and managing him, and it really brought home to me the way that, you know, this is an incredibly carefully managed brand.
I mean, lots of people aspire to being rich and famous like the Beckhams, but it's not all it's cracked up to be, is it?
No, and it sort of is real life and it isn't real life, and actually it creates these artificial conditions that probably sees people attracted to you who actually have got no other real interest in you apart from what you can offer to them. And I think that must lead to all sorts of complexities and difficulties and worries and anxieties about who you can trust, whether people are actually really interested in you and that relationship and what it can offer on both sides. So you can see how kids in particular get damaged in that world where there is a brand, your parents are so front and centre in terms of media coverage and, you know, top of sport, top of music. That also sets huge expectations on you, doesn't it? You think about any family relationship. When your parents are that focal, that successful, that must breed some concerns, some worries, some anxieties.
But I think those, and I think those tensions, if you believe this, is at the heart of this. I was listening to the Nicky Campbell phone-in this week, and he quoted that when Brooklyn was first born, David did an interview and said, well, of course he's going to be famous. And Nicky Campbell said, you know, that sent a chill down my spine, saying that, you know, your child has got to be famous by dint of your fame and notoriety. And it's a bit uncomfortable. And, you know, if you read some of the reports, there is a view that he hasn't fulfilled their ambitions for him. And that's at the heart of some of the family dispute.
I do wonder as well if social media has played a part in this, because in the past, yes, celebrities were on the front of newspapers, perhaps they were doorstepped outside their houses, but they didn't have the pressure of posting on Instagram 6 times a day.
That's right. And we now live in a social media age where I think everybody in public life feels that there is a need to constantly feed the beast of social media, and actually it's hugely unhealthy, doesn't represent real life really at all, creates completely artificial expectations around people and about life more generally and the value of things and expectations. I think it's really sad.
Well, I hope you two are going to go home and post all your appearances on Instagram. I'll follow you back later. But yes, a great show. Thank you guys so much for joining me this evening. What a week of news. Lots internationally and nationally, but have a great weekend. Up next, I've got Lee Anderson. I'll be back on Monday with Andrew Pearce for Britain's Newsroom at 9:30. Have a great weekend.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Gusty winds and showery rain will continue for many of us this weekend. Not everywhere all the time. There will be some drier and indeed sunnier weather. But it'll also feel colder with that cold air coming in from the east, although not excessively cold. And we still have low pressure towards the southwest to contend with gusty and wet for Cornwall, Devon especially, but those bands of rain and showers pushing into the rest of the southwest as well as parts of Wales overnight. The wind gusts coming down a little by dawn, but it stays windy in the east of Scotland with further outbreaks of rain and hill snow here. In between, actually, there will be some drier and clearer weather in Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, through the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, starting off with some sunshine. The odd mist and fog patch, chilly first thing, but actually plenty of fine weather. Wales, though, especially South Wales, cloudy and damp, and we'll see some rain starting to return at this stage into southern parts of Northern Ireland. But the most persistent rain continues across eastern and northeastern Scotland. Above 400 metres, this will be falling as snow, significant snow accumulations over the Grampians, the hills and mountains, seeing ice accretion and blizzard conditions, so really quite treacherous on top of the Grampians. But it does ease off later in the day on Saturday. The rain at lower levels also eases. Continuing to be showery towards the southwest, but we do keep that drier slot across central parts of the UK with some sunshine. Not necessarily continuing into Sunday, because we'll see another band of rain move northeastwards through Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland, the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. Spells of rain turning increasingly showery for many and feeling colder as that air comes in from the east and southeast. That will lead to some snow, especially across northern parts on Tuesday.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for the thousands of you who are becoming friends of GB News every week.
You're not only watching and listening to our programmes, you're becoming part of them too.
Good evening, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The A726 is closed eastbound between Righead Roundabout and Eaglesham Road because of emergency roadworks. On the A55 at Britannia Bridge, a temporary limit of 30 miles per hour is in place in both directions until further notice. On the M6 northbound between Junction 4 and Junction 6 near Solihull, a broken down vehicle is causing delays. In Kent, the M25 anti-clockwise between Junction 4 and Junction 1A is heavily congested, with delays of around 1.5 hours. And on the trains, cross-country has major disruption, and Great Western Railway is disrupted with rail replacement buses between Liscard and Loo. For more travel news, go to GB News.
An incredible £85,000 in tax-free cash could be yours.
Hi, I'm Jane. I won £54,321 with the Great British Giveaway. Oh, definitely, please.